Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 196. Really excited for today's guest. This is a guy I've actually known for quite some time. He's a guy from the Northeast who did some really cool stuff actually early in his career, right as I was getting going with CSP, many years ago. And we were fortunate to collaborate on quite a few athletes. And it's been awesome watching his rise through the college baseball ranks. Several stops along the way with some great successes. Super passionate guy, very insightful. He's got some awesome resources at his fingertips that, he's going to talk about in this podcast. So just some really good information here, not just for higher level players that might have those amenities at their fingertips, but also a lot of practical information that really any pitcher should understand. We talk a lot about, starting pitchers not going far into games and one of the reasons why that may be the case. I thought he had a really cool theory on that front. He also shares some really cool insights with respect to the NIL component of the college recruiting world today. Obviously, the transfer portal is raging right now, and college sports are very different than what we've known in the past. So he speaks to his experiences with that and how he sees the landscape continuing to change in the years ahead. We did have some mild audio issues in this one, but I think it'll still come out pretty good. My man David Powers, who does all of our editing, shout out to him for doing a great job in cleaning up the audio on this to make sure that it was good for everybody. Hope you enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition habit on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest played college baseball at Siena and Franklin Pierce, and then began his coaching career at Southern New Hampshire in 2010. He moved on to Binghamton for the 2011 season, and then returned to Southern New Hampshire in 2012 to serve as pitching coach and recruiting coordinator. During that 2012 season, the program advanced to the College World Series and won a school record 43 games, with his pitching staff leading the nation in ERA and strikeouts per 9 innings. He moved on to the pitching coach role at St. John's for 2013 to 2017, and then spent 2018 to 2021 in the same role at the University of Maryland. He then joined Wake Forest as their pitching coach and recently completed his 3rd year with the Demon Deacons. In 2023, he was named D1 Baseball's Assistant Coach of the Year. In addition to the Wake Forest staff becoming one of the most dominant in Division I baseball, the program has also produced some of the top pitching prospects in minor league baseball and become a hub for off-season continuing education for folks in the baseball industry. Please welcome to the show, Corey Muscara. Corey, man, thanks so much for joining us. We've had a great relationship for a really long time. It's been cool following the trajectory of your career, and I appreciate carving out some time.
Yeah, I'm thankful. I mean, to be honest, I don't know that I'd probably get to this step if you weren't training all my guys at Southern New Hampshire. Everybody was asking us, like, hey, how's everybody throwing so hard over there? And little they know that we just had everybody training with you. You know what I
That
mean?
was a fun group of guys that really like to work hard. And I mean, Southern New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce are some really good Division II programs in the Northeast. You were part of the Franklin Pierce, and obviously Southern New Hampshire, and you did some really cool stuff there. But it was a blue collar. It was these guys that were really willing to work for it. A lot of them have been overlooked, and I think had a little chip on their shoulder. So it was very cool to see. And you were at the center of a lot of that stuff. Not just from a knowledge standpoint, but I think also from a charisma and excitability standpoint, like you got that's really fired up to train. I've always respected about that about you. So I'm psyched to have you on today.
No, I'm lucky. I've just got to be around really great people. And that's the key. I talk about my players all the time. You're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. So make sure you surround yourself with dudes. And if you surround yourself with lazy complainers and excuse makers, you're probably going to be more like them.
True.
But luckily for me, I've surrounded myself with guys like Scott Loazzo, Jason King, Scott Brown, Rob Vaughn, now Billy Salino, Coach Walter, Matt Wessinger, Ed Blankmeyer, Ty Blankmeyer. I've just been around really good people.
It's been
And
incredible.
the first time the first baseball strength coach I ever even heard of was you. and you hired my buddy that I grew up with to do your pitching stuff. I'm like, Daddy, who is this guy? Like, what are you doing right now? Isn't it true? Didn't he respond to a Craigslist ad or something for you?
So what actually happened? Matt played at Holy Cross, and his strength coach, Brajesh Patel, was one of my really close friends. We were in grad school together. Brajesh was really the guy that got me hooked on strength and conditioning. So when Matt graduated, as an email, hey, I just, kind of soft throwing lefty that's really curious on the pitching side of things. He's not enjoying sales. He wants to get back into it. He's followed some of your stuff. Would you be open to an intro? And I said, absolutely. Came by. It was right around the time we were starting to get some stuff going at the facility. And he's like, Matt, what do you think? And connected him with Kirk Fredericks and Lincoln Sudbury. And, from one client we gave him, Matt built out an empire. So something about these New Hampshire guys, man, they know how to work.
It's so funny. I think about this often when Maddie and I talk now, but to see where baseball takes you, I have to throw this in there because every chance I have to throw a jab at it, I do. But we were playing high school basketball against each other. Neither one of us was very good at the sport. And my high school team was pretty good. And his high school team just decided they were going to hold the basketball the entire game because there was no shot clock. So it was the most boring game in the history of basketball. It was like a 10-5 game with and so anyways, we to come from that to when he's doing what he's doing now, you're working with the Yankees too, obviously. I'm down here. It's pretty surreal. Time flies and you don't really understand how you got to this point, but along the way, it's just the people you've met and the relationships you've made along the way that matter most, really.
You talked a little bit about your trajectory, the people you've encountered. So obviously started at Southern New Hampshire, went to Binghamton for a year, back to SNU, SNHU, I should say, St. John's, Maryland, now Wake Forest. And I think at each stop, obviously, the level of competition increases, and you also get more national recognition, and certainly, the assumption would be more resources at your fingertips, better players to manage. It's probably a little bit easier to recruit in some ways and probably harder in others. But I'm curious, how hard is it then for you as a coach to have to go through a recalibration each time you go to a different level of play?
That's a good question. I mean, there's definitely little differences at every stop, right? You need a more refined player. The game in and of itself is a little bit more tactical, right? Each level that you move up, the game speed's a little bit faster. Your opponents are a little bit more prepared. You too have to prepare, but that's all part of the evolution of it, right? The game is still the game. It's not much different. Everything just kind of heightens a little bit, Well, like I said, we were talking about being around good people earlier. When I first started, and I was working with Sky Loazzo at Southern New Hampshire, we both knew we needed athletes. We both knew we needed guys that had passion. That doesn't change. You still need athletes. You still need guys that have passion. And maybe I didn't really know what I was doing back then. I knew some basic principles, but I understood that if you get guys that want to keep working, they would figure out a way to get better. And that was the very first thing I learned was how important it was to have great culture where guys are excited to compete and excited to get better every day. They have to look forward to coming to your facility, coming to your place. And if you can capture that from day one, you got something going, And then what happens is in anything you do and how you grow, you have to have one staying tool or one staying thing that can allow you to survive until you can acquire another skill set. It's no different for you when you started Cressey Performance, right? You probably had a certain carrying skill that allowed you to keep it floating. And then you acquire another and another and another. And it's the same thing in player development. When all these guys get into A-ball, they have one, maybe two carrying tools that allows them to stay at that level. And then they cultivate that tool and they acquire another and another and another. It's the same thing when you move up the ladders of different levels of college baseball. You just have to keep acquiring more tools. You have to keep growing. You have to keep refining your skill and your strategy. And then eventually, hopefully you can compete at the highest level,
That's incredible. And it's actually somewhat consistent. I actually remember having a conversation with Darren O'Day right at the end of his career. And he said something very consistent. He said, everybody that makes it to this level has at least one thing they do really, really well, right? There are guys that have as hitters massive holes, in their zones and things like that where guys can expose them, but they know how to look for a mistake and really capitalize on it. You have pitchers that have one pitch, and then some guys late in their career those skills deteriorate and they become great leaders. They bring something unique where not everybody's just vanilla. Most of them have some outlier quality that makes them really good.
You have to survive in this. Athletics at the highest level is one of the most competitive things on the planet. I try to explain it to people all the time, and it's dude, just imagine an industry where everything you do is out in public open and anyone can criticize it. And everyone you compete against works like a maniac. So it's awesome. It's a great job, but it's not for the faint of heart, no matter what level you're at. It's not. And you have to be able to really work, and you have to really be able to deal with criticism, and you have to deal with that type of fishbowl type of culture, society that you're living in, so yeah, I think that's why you see everybody having a skill, because it is so competitive, and the funnel that you're taking to to grow up the ladder it's so small. You think about where you're at in your career right now, and you started in what town in Mass were you actually
Hudson.
in? You were in Hudson.
Yeah.
Yeah. You started a small town in Massachusetts. Most of the world has no idea where Hudson, Mass is, and, but a lot of people in baseball know who Eric Cressey is, and they have no idea where Hudson, Mass is. You know what I mean?
I appreciate you saying that, man. We're talking about you though. So, Wake has developed a really good national reputation, not just for winning, developing players, but I think more granular. It's because you guys have done some really cool stuff on the tech side of things, not just what you've done for your players, but also becoming a little bit of an educational hub with the events you guys put on in the off season. And the Biomechanics lab has gotten a lot of love. You big league guys that'll come in and do stuff there as well. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned utilizing that lab? Are there things that have maybe reaffirmed stuff that you already knew and made you even more resolute that this is important? And have there also been things that maybe proved you wrong and blown your mind in other ways?
That's such a loaded question.
Yeah.
Probably should have read the questions you asked me before.
That's all good.
A little bit deliberately, but I'll go off the cuff here a little bit and just kind of, what hits me first with that is the number one thing that we do here constantly that is totally lab driven, and I've realized over seeing it over and over again is planar rotation stuff. We want our guys to rotate in planar rotation as much as possible. It allows the delivery to be the most efficient. It's probably going to optimize the best ball flight characteristics. That's pretty much a no-brainer for all of our guys. another thing that's really important that's really came to light in the last, I'd say, year or so isn't like directly, I would say, a lab piece, but it's more like the industry's like kind of starting to morph and shift a little bit, and we've been able to look at this from a different lens, and it's been very applicable. But that's motor preferences, and my good friend Matt Swope is like all about. He's the motor preference expert. That's his company. We don't do it to that level. Like I don't have an understanding, even like 1/100th of what he's at. But understanding and watching throwers, it's very, very, very obvious to me that certain throwers are biased towards supination, certain throwers are biased towards pronation. And like, if you don't take that into account in pitch design, then you're really missing the boat. So like that's been something that's been really beneficial for us. I never thought I desired supinators as much as I did until I do now when I started to understand seam shifted wake a little bit more. So like that's been really big. Understanding too, like how like you know, I think I've gone through every fad of teaching the lower half in a pitching delivery, from like having guys jump to having guys sit to having guys counter rotate. Like any fad you could think of that's been out there to teach the lower half in a pitching delivery the last 16 years, I've probably taught it at some point. And what I've learned coming full circle from all that is they're all right for the right person.
That's it.
And like it again, it goes back to understanding how people move. Like, we get into these battles and we get into these wars fighting everything, on Twitter and stuff like that. But the reality is, for the right person, they're right. It's how do they understand how to apply force? It's how do they understand the timing of their delivery? And everybody's different, that's truly the art of it all, right? Like you could take all the science and you could take all the information in the world, but you have to understand that like everybody's different. Not everybody should throw on the same side of the rubber. Not everybody should move the same way. Not everybody should throw the same pitches. Not everybody should have the same pitch plan. And the art is trying to figure out like what you can give to each guy to give them their identity. And sometimes we're going to try to make a guy better, and sometimes it's going to go backwards. But if you can maintain health as the priority, if you could do everything to ensure that they're healthy, you can always overcome a setback in performance, right? So you have to put health at the forefront of all things. And you have to like infuse that into all of your practice plans and all of your programming. But then you could take risks, you could take chances on, trying to get guys' stuff or arsenal or usages better. And we've been fortunate, knock on wood, that most of the time they've worked, but every now and then they don't. Like it's very easy because like everybody sees all the success stories, and we've been very blessed to have a few lately. But there's also guys that aren't as successful with it. And the way I look at it is like that's going to happen. We just have to make sure we do everything in our power to keep them healthy, which again, in the world that we're in with wherever it is, 46, 44, 48% TJs or about to be TJs in the big leagues right now. That's not an easy task either. But yeah, those are like the main points that I've taken away. And those are all notions that I've felt in the past, but those concepts I just talked about have been solidified. So I would say planar rotation is paramount. I would say, understanding that there really is a lot of uniqueness to each guy, and you have to account for that uniqueness and how they move and what their preferences are, what their biases are, things like that. And then the last thing for me is just like we can quantify deception, right? Like we need to quantify deception, and everything we do is about quantifying deception. And then I'd say the other thing too that we talk about here constantly is we track everything. Everything's tracked, everything's stored. This allows us to be very objective every day and create a lot of rankings. It also allows us to see what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. Those are probably the biggest pillars that I've taken away from my time being around all this technology and data constantly. Right there.
That was I mean, for a guy that didn't prepare for the question, that was a very succinct and incredibly well thought out answer. Because and one of the biggest differences for me in having access to a lot of this information is it's a reminder that fitting guys to averages is the worst approach we can possibly utilize. We talked earlier about outlier qualities. Like, you look at some of these guys and some of them move down the mound incredibly fast and are really soft on their front leg. Some of them hold their back hip, and are really, really slow down the mound. They have these elite lead leg, posting velocities. It's big leaguers come in all shapes and sizes, all different deliveries. I think your point about supinating and pronating, the radial and ulnar deviation guys who can make balls turn left versus right is incredibly important, in an era. And, we saw Dr. Meister talking about his feelings that, a lot of the kind of designer pitches were maybe at the root of a lot of the elbow issues we've seen where, guys who are, learning sweepers in a week or power changeups in a week and, throwing them in games at high usage percentages. In many cases, I think that's because guys are learning pitches that aren't in line with their unique movement characteristics. They're trying to do something that their body's not allowing them to get to.
I'd like to add to that for a second.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that plays a factor, but it also plays a factor because they haven't allowed their body to have that I can't even say it, acclimatization period, that onboarding, if you will, for their body to adjust. I would say that, people have been talking about perfect mechanics for years, but for me, the root of a lot of our arm problems is our bodies are not strong enough to handle it. They're not. We don't throw enough, right? Like we get to fatigue faster. We haven't had a proper acute to chronic workload. All of these factors are part of it. We don't have forearm strength and grip strength like we used to. Our shoulder strength isn't as good as our posture is not as good. So like for me, I think a lot of our injuries could be avoided if we were really diligent about that. I mean, and while I'm going down this, I'm exhibit A, our diets aren't as good. We have more inflammation in our body. Like the food that we all eat is not as good. We don't sleep as well. You want to talk about why the injuries are worse? Like, it's all of this, right? Like if you want to fix the injury problem, like you have to be mindful of all things. And I can't tell you how many times I see it where and we're all to blame, but kids will play on 3 or 4 teams and they go to this thing and that thing and this thing, and they don't have any deload period. Like they don't have any on-ramping period, and I always say to the kids constantly, I'm like, hey, if you haven't lifted in 6 months, would you just get under a squat rack and start, back squatting 350 and you haven't done anything in 6 months? They'd be like, no, I wouldn't be able to walk for 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah. So why do you just go out there and just start yeeting balls when you haven't done anything? You know what I mean? Like, that's all part of it. It's all part of it.
I couldn't agree more. And what's really fascinating too is, and I'm curious to maybe get your perspective on this, is what I've kind of noticed is this scenario of like, even when kids are healthy, and I'm thinking of a guy right off the top of my mind. We have a rising senior who's committed to an SEC school. He threw 17 innings this summer. He was completely healthy. He had, 39 or whatever it was in high school, kind of like right on the normal trajectory, got to summer ball and 17 competitive innings from, presumably June 1 into August. I mean, that's, you're looking at like less than 9 innings per month for a completely healthy kid. Like, we've created this kind of like showcase circuit for all these top prospects. And the single most important thing we can do for these guys, obviously, is put them in a physically good position, but work capacity is very skill specific. I always talk about, like, Lance Armstrong was an elite cyclist, and he became a very average marathoner because the movements were very, very different. He actually said it was the hardest thing he had ever done when he ran the New York Marathon. And, we have these guys that just aren't like fundamentally prepared. I couldn't agree more about like this idea of needing to throw more, because they show up in, July or August at Wake Forest as rising freshmen, and there's no chronic workload. You really have to like build it up over the course.
That's all we do. So it's funny you say that. So when guys come to summer school, all we do is on ramp. All I'm trying to do is build work capacity. Every guy's like, hey, what can I get in the lab? I'm like, no, man, sorry. Like, You need to build up your work capacity. Sorry, like, not happening. That's all I think about. Like, my number one thing I was worried about, like, everyone wants to talk about all this stuff that happened with Chase Burns last year. All I thought about every day was, how do I keep this dude healthy? Like, I was having like nightmares about it. Like, I know how good he is. Like, I got to keep him healthy. Like, it don't matter if he throws 101 if he blows out, you know? So, yeah, that's all I think about constantly.
I
We've
love that.
got into the Flex Pro. We've had some good success with that to start. You know, I can't say I'm versed on it enough. We've had it for a year. I like the early returns on it. I like the concept quite a bit. We're doing it again, you know. I like the idea of Ryan Croton's arm care. We're trying to set something up with that, but mainly just because I like the idea of constantly. I'm a big fan of getting objective information daily, and I work really well with that in coaching because I just say to kids like, "Hey, you're here. I need you here. Figure it out." Like I just do that all the time. Like I turn everything into an equation. Hey, why aren't I pitching more? Well, you're weak with your shoulder. Sorry. Like, get better. Let's go. Like, you want to pitch better? Here, all right, here we go. You know, like, hey, you don't hold runners. Here's all the data that proves that you don't hold runners. I need you to do a better job of that. And so what I found is like if you could be super organized with every piece of objective information you can, and you could quantify it and you can disseminate the information, give it to players quickly, it's so easy because you're just like, hey, like this is what you need to do. Either you get better at it or you don't. I don't know. It's up to you. You want to play, get better. And then you give them solutions. Say, here's 4 solutions to your problem. I would recommend you do these 4 solutions. If you don't want to do these, that's fine. That's okay. You're probably not going to be able to stay here very long and you won't play. So it's very simple. You want to play, here's your problem. Here's your solutions. Here's what I recommend you doing about them. And I'll track it again and I'll have an update for you in about 4 or 5 weeks. And I'll let you know if it's getting better or not. And if it's not getting better, you're gonna have to really make a choice of whether or not you could stay here. You know, so it's up to you. But let me know. All right, every day. And I just tell at that point, I'm just like, hey, we just have to have the most fun we can have every day. Because I get that question all the time, like, oh, like it looks like your guys are having a lot of fun. Like, how do you rein it in? How do they have discipline? I'm like, it's pretty simple. Like, I just track everything, and they want to play, they're going to do these things. And if they don't want to play, then they're not going to stay. So there's the discipline. It's pretty simple. You know what I mean?
I love that you objectively understand how to really utilize data, and it's obviously made you a really good coach. I think if you understand, we also have seen scenarios where maybe tech has had downfall with player development, right? They're guys that may look awesome on TrackMan and bullpens, and then they obviously struggle to perform well and get hitters out in games. Are there times where you've had conversations with players about, how maybe we need to use tech less? I mean, obviously you hinted at that with respect to kind of some of the early onboarding stuff and building capacity. Times where you have to counsel them away from it, even though you have all these bells and whistles, at your fingertips.
Yeah, look, there's so much of it is feel. Like I've been on podcasts before where I talk about this. Like Ed Blankmeyer is a huge influence in my career, and he used to talk all the time about how I used to have no feel, right? And he's right though. Like the game is feel. Look, all of these components matter, right? Like it's the same reason I've had this conversation with Matt Blake. Actually, so many people in player development and professional baseball for a while. There was this cry of there not being the death of the starting pitcher, right? Like we don't have anybody that can eat innings anymore. All right, I'm going to explain this and my theory on this, and it's going to go right to your question. So bear with me. I believe very strongly that there's a death of the starting pitcher because we've gotten too caught up into shapes of pitches, into optimizing shapes. Here's the problem. If you just only optimize shapes based on where the WOBA is going to be, based on where slug's going to perform on a heat map, yes, that gives you a greater snapshot in time. But what it doesn't do in a singular outing is allow you to roll a lineup over and get somebody out differently than you may normally get them out. And being a starting pitcher is not about having the best expecteds. Being a starting pitcher is about rolling a lineup over. So what happens is when we are at the lower levels of the minor league and we want stuff, and we tell guys just to throw to one location strategy to optimize not giving up the free base, right? We tell them the challenge in the zone, which is 100% right. We want to eliminate the free 90. That's baseball 101. But then they don't learn how to command their stuff to multiple quadrants. This is now why you see organizations like the Yankees throwing cutters and two-seamers and four-seamers, because they need to get the ball to multiple quadrants. Because the skill of being able to command a fastball to four quadrants is not a thing anymore, right? That's where analytics gets a bad term, because, and I'm the biggest analytics, in favor of analytics guy ever. But we've taken expecteds, we've taken probabilities to such an extreme that we've taken away the ability for guys to move their fastball around. If you look at professional baseball right now, there's very few pitchers that can throw a dead zone fastball wherever they want. One of them being George Kirby for the Mariners. Well, let's look at George Kirby's innings the last couple of years. He throws more innings than everybody. Here's why. You get the fastball counts, and the hitter's dead red on a fastball. Okay. And he has the heat map, and he knows where the probability of that fastball is going to be. He knows the shape of the fastball. He already saw it on Traject in the batting cage, and he's seen it 15 times. He knows where that fastball is going to be. He's going to be on time. We don't value the strikeout anymore. No one cares. It's all about the slug, damage to fastball, and not in a fastball count. Well, if I'm throwing a fastball in a fastball count, but maybe it's in or it's up or it's down and it's not where I want it to be, maybe I get him to pop it up, or maybe I get a rollover. This is why you're seeing now the starting pitchers that are starting to have more success are throwing a dead zone heater to the top of the zone, maybe a good sinker and a good cutter. And for a while in baseball, we were vilifying the sinker. We were saying the sinker's dead. The sinker's dead. And now it's now everyone wants it's all cyclical. It all comes back. So my answer to your thing is data is great, but we get trends, and everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room. So we go so hard on trends. We need to take a step back, and we need to be holistic. We need to use data, but we need to understand the same way I talked about it in terms of biomechanics, in terms of in the weight room, that everybody's different. Everybody needs to have different arsenals. And we need to look at their arsenal, globally instead of locally on one pitch, how good one pitch is. It's got to be how can we turn lineups over? How can we create different contact points? How can we get people off time? And how do we command it to leverage counts?
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF certified all-in-one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you'll get that special offer. I remember looking into this. 2017, two pitchers had a lower OPS third time through the order than they did second time through the order.
Yeah.
Corey Kluber and Max Scherzer, they won the Cy Youngs. And I've been lucky to be around both of them. And what I could tell you is Kluber could roll out of bed and throw a cutter for a strike. And he always could do it with his two seam. So he had two pitches that he could always locate when needed, in a count where someone would traditionally expect a fastball. When you get around Max, you realize Max plays catch with his secondary stuff more than anybody I ever met. You don't see a four seam until 5 minutes into playing catch with him, because he's spinning, he's locating. It's so much about feel. And there was a great article on The Athletic about guys like Lugo and Musgrove and some of these guys who have gone, to 8-9 pitches in their repertoire. But it was really centered around the idea of having a four seam, a two seam, and a cutter, really three separate fastballs that they could locate. And I think that you absolutely nailed it, is that, the data grades pitches, but it doesn't necessarily grade scenarios, and how people use them in different timelines. Is it really, it's what it's doing is it's mixing and matching what the hitter should expect.
100%. And you really grow an appreciation for this on a deep level when you have to call a game all the time. During the season, all I do is spend time evaluating and studying and breaking down hitters. I often joke sometimes I'm better. Maybe I should be a hitting coach, because all I do is watch hitters. You know what I mean? And when you start to pay attention to the game and you start to understand counts and how to leverage counts and how to win counts, you start to realize that it's not so much about who has the best stuff. It's about who can command things and flip and change counts and create weak contact, you know? And again, I love the data. All right. I do. But like, and it gives you some clues and gives you some cool insights that you might not have seen. But like, if you go wholesale on it and you don't pay attention to the game, I don't want to like give away trade secrets, and I'm not going to like go in depth on it. But like, I'm gonna tell you right now, Garrett Cole does not win the Cy Young last year if he doesn't start moving his fastball around. If he just throws the expecteds at a high probability, he's not a Cy Young Award winner. Period. And his FIP's probably not as good as it was the year before, but he's a damn better pitcher and he goes deeper into games because of it. I don't need anyone to tell me that. I can watch the game and I can see that he moved his fastball around more last year than in previous years. And that's why he had the success he had.
I think the thing that comes down to is stuff is stuff. Like everyone's got it in the big leagues. Really what stuff does is it gives you more of a buffer when you make mistakes, right? You don't have that. If you have a 98 mile an hour turbo sinker, it's inherently a lot different than an 88 mile an hour sinker. It's just
100%.
You get away with a lot more.
And to your point, it gets you away for one at bat. It does a really, really good job for one at bat. It doesn't help you a third time. Because in the third time, your stuff's not as good as the first time. And the third time, they sit on things. They don't swing at things. So they win the count. So now you're behind in the count. Now you feel the pressure. So that's why the stuff doesn't matter in time 3. Time 3, it's your skill. It's your mind. It's your ability to pitch. Why we don't have any starting pitchers? Because we don't let them be starting pitchers. Again, going back to AC workload. Like, we don't build them up ever to throw. They don't ever turn lineups over. All through high school, they threw 2-3 innings at a time in travel ball summer, you know? And so until we start to allow people to like figure things out and like, again, like going back to like pitch development, like the changeup is such a hard pitch to quantify on Stuff Plus models because there's front to back changeups. There's Devin Williams airbenders. You know, a changeup can be good on so many levels, but the changeup is good when you pair it with the fastball, right? I forget the guy's name, but there was a guy with the Blue Jays like maybe 5-6 years ago who threw like a high vert changeup. And I was like, what is that? There's guys that throw high spin changeups, right? So you can't make a model that's going to capture all changeups, right? So as a byproduct, unless it's like this crazy movement profile changeup, we don't have a lot of great front to back changeups in the game anymore. A guy that does have a good front to back changeup in the game right now is Jordan Montgomery. Oh, weird. Like, he was really good. And everyone said, why is he so good? And he just got $100 million and he just helped this team win a World Series. Stuff Plus doesn't have that pitch is that good. The hitters are telling you it's pretty good. And what happens is, like, when we were back in the old school development, if you didn't have a good changeup, it was like mandated. Everyone had to have a changeup, right? Well, again, we now know like there's pronators or supinators. There's different ways to have a changeup. Yet again, why changeup's a field pitch, right? Because you can use seam orientation to create different variations of set pitch. But with all the data and understanding that we have now, if we did this in pro ball where we went back to the lower levels of the minor leagues and we said, hey, Johnny, you have to throw 30 changeups today. Sorry. And Johnny had to do it more, we'd get more of this, you know? And again, that's stuff that I haven't seen. And again, I'm not in every org and I don't see every game, but just talking to my former players that are all in minor leagues, talking to a bunch of my buddies that are coordinators at different places and pro coaches, that's not as much the norm as it was a decade ago. Like, that was like, you know, even in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that was baseball 101. That stuff doesn't happen as much anymore, you know? And I think giving pitchers solutions to figure out how to creatively get people out and allowing them to fail at doing so is how you're going to figure out how people could do this longer. And to be honest with you, if you could figure out how guys could do this and keep pitching longer into games, right? And keeping their pitch count down, you're going to also start to help arm injuries because you're going to build up capacity. You're going to get them into games longer, right? Like, it all goes hand in hand. Like,
save the bullpen too.
Yeah. Yes. All about it.
You talked a little bit about some of the guys that you've had that have gone to pro ball and the experiences that they share with you. I'm curious, as you look at these guys, and you've had some that have moved, really quickly and done well in a short amount of time. What are some of the key competencies that you think differentiate the players who, you know, get to pro ball and thrive versus the ones that maybe come to Wake Forest and aren't the right fit, wind up transferring elsewhere? What separates the guys that keep a career going past age 21, 22 versus the ones where it peters out early in the SEC or the ACC, I should say?
They have an insane desire to learn. The majority of my guys that are in pro ball right now, and I've heard this time and time again, they could essentially be the analyst for their teams. Like they like a lot of my pitchers do scouting reports for their hitters for the other team's pitchers. Like I have multiple guys that do that. And if you talk to my guys, like they can start breaking things down on like a very deep level, and they're all self-proclaimed nerds when it comes to pitching. Like it's really hard to be in this environment on a day-to-day basis with how much we talk about all things development and not become obsessed with it. And so these guys get there and like they're genuinely excited about their whole process. They've built out really good routines. They understand their routines. They're not afraid to do things. They're not afraid to try things. They have a really strong understanding of what they do. They know what their data looks like. They know if their data is off. They understand it. They know, hey, maybe like, oh, my hip's bothering me. All right, I'm not rotating as well. Like, I need to figure that out. We've got a lot of our guys that have, instead of spending a ton of money on like, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of them have bought cool cars, but like for the most part, they're not spending their money like as much like going out partying. They're spending their money on like having a guy that's going to help them understand how to move. Like almost all my guys have like their Tom Brady guy, like their guy that's like going to like stretch them and like help them with massage, whatever. Like our guys are really in tune with that and they're constantly talking about it. So I think the difference for guys that do well are they're not afraid to fail. They have failed. They're open to what they need to do to get better. And they're like each day is like a new day to learn, and like they're excited about it. They're open to it. None of it's really overwhelming. And at the lower levels of the minor leagues, like when you're thinking like that, you're playing chess and other people are playing checkers. Now, obviously, as the funnel gets shrunk and you get to the higher levels, everybody's on that wavelength, right? So that can help you skip levels, but then eventually, like you have to go play with the big boys where everybody's on the same page. At that point, there's a lot of other factors that go into play. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's staying healthy, it's dealing with failure. So again, most of my guys that I've coached the last few years predominantly are like in double A right now. So like they're not all in the show yet. Guys that I've had that have been in the show, a lot of them were, like lower round draft picks that were non-prospects that just competed their way there. And they've done it through just being tougher and more competitive than others. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of those things.
And definitely, it's a changing time. So I'm really fascinated to hear of guys with like that growth mindset that are looking to stay ahead of it. And I joke, maybe joke isn't the right word, that sports medicine is just trying to keep up with how fast guys are developing and the new challenges that are throwing at it. So when you hear guys that are investing in themselves and being proactive, it's always a really cool thing. Maybe in the same vein of changing eras. Before we started the call, we're talking on August 2nd. Yesterday, like floodgates open up from like a recruiting standpoint. The goalposts are being shifted on a pretty regular basis. I'm curious with respect to development, right? Obviously, with the transfer portal being what it is, we're seeing much more like guys who maybe come, for 1 year. Obviously, we still have some like COVID holdovers that are doing grad years. Have you found that the developmental models sometimes have had to shift to 9 to 10 month blocks versus the 3 to 4 years that you would maybe plan on in years past?
There's zero doubt that the game has changed. Like for so long, we're talking about Southern New Hampshire. Like when I was at Southern New Hampshire, I was just looking for big athletic, like good movers in general, like how they walked, ran, moved in general, loose movers. And I would just try to teach them how to throw hard. You know what I mean? And then you're looking for like, okay, I need a skill. I need command, right? And then you're looking for like, all right, I need a pitch. Then you're looking for like outlier stuff, like it just keeps going up and up. At the point we're at now, like you have 34 guys on your roster. That's it. There's 34 guys. And by moving, you're not allowed to talk to anyone until August 1st. And really, moving forward, no one can really commit. That means that all the best players are going to be available in their junior years. Well, for the last 8 to 9 years, guys have been committing as freshmen and sophomores, and it was a giant game of tag. Like they would just go tag somebody, whoever saw them first got them. You know what I mean? Well, now we're going to get to the point where like everybody's going to know who everybody is. And so now, like, you're going to be able to put together 12 and 15 man classes where certain schools are going to have every player be in the top 50, top 100, and people are going to be able to get people to not to go to college or not to sign professionally and go to college. And you're going to have the transfer portal. So these rosters are going to be loaded. And the reality of it is if guys can't compete right away, people aren't going to stay. They're just going to transfer and go somewhere else because it's not even like pro ball. It's like every year's free agency. Now, imagine coaching the New York Yankees where everyone was on a 1-year deal. The whole org be like, what? Like, how do you even do that?
Spring speed dating already. Like you're trying to get to know 75 guys in a matter of, 2 separate days of onboarding. But the hardest guys to learn are the ones that join the org the day before the spring training starts and everything. But that's what scares me the most about kind of the nature of where college sports is headed is that, everyone, gets concerned about, young kids having access to financial resources too soon when they're not ready for it. But I think, just as maybe concerningly is like the sports medicine challenges of guys that are, playing for a new program every single year. It's hard enough when guys go to get onboarded at summer ball or something like that. And I'm sure, for you guys roll back in for the fall and you always get surprised by 1 or 2 that are in a different spot than you expected them to come back. So I do worry that that's an entire team-wide thing moving forward.
Yeah, there's so many variables that like I don't think any of us have answers to. And like I talk about this a lot in terms of development with people when they ask, like, hey, what's your player development plan? I'm like, you have 7 days and 400 hours to talk about it. Because look, the mental game is big. There's sports psychologist and mental skills coach. That's a full-time job. Strength and conditioning is huge. You have that as a full-time job. Understanding pitch design and pitch shapes is very vast. That's a full-time job. Every piece of development, there's a person that is their full-time responsibility, right? And I say this because it's the same thing with all these rule changes. Each thing, there's so many layers. So in order to like really grasp all of it, there used to be this saying, we want to be, we don't want to be a mile wide and an inch deep. We want to be, a mile deep and whatever, an inch wide or whatever, the reverse. I disagree. I think today, trying to develop players, if like you're the pitching coach or you're the hitting coach, you almost need to be a mile wide and an inch deep. And then you need to allow the experts in their field to kind of take over and massage that area that needs. But you as a pitching coach now today have to be well-versed in all things. Like maybe I can't break down dorsiflexion like you can. Maybe I can't assess internal, external hip mobility like you can, right? But I have to understand a very base layer of what that is. Just like you're not going to be able to tell me how to get Dylan Cruz out in a 2K count. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be able to tell me that, but I have to have an understanding of that. And I might not be able to tell you and break down flow state like Bob Tewksbury can, but I probably need to have an understanding of how you could potentially access it, right? So I have to my role is I have to understand a lot of these different things. And it's the same way with all these changes to our sport, right? I can't be perfect in understanding every outcome, but I have to look at it globally and try to say all right, well, how am I best going to leverage the situation that we're in? How am I going to best position ourselves so we can try to make sense of all this nonsense? Because none of us know what's going to happen. And if we sit there without a plan, we're going to go nowhere. It's the General George Patton. I'm going to mess this quote up, but he said something like, the wrong plan executed with aggression is better than the right plan executed passively. And it's true. Like, you have to be aggressive in how you approach things, and you have to believe in it. And so for us, I think if we're going to execute plans, we have to try to consider all the different, stakeholders and all these things and put them into one situation and then be aggressively with it, act aggressively. And then when we make a mistake, because we're going to, and we need to reshift, we need to be objective, we need to give ourselves constructive feedback, and we need to redo the plan and then do it aggressively again. And that's ultimately what life is, right? It's look at a global view of whatever it is you're doing, consider all the different, perspectives, put together a plan, go act aggressively. Plan didn't go good. Readjust plan, make assessments, do it again. That's life. You know what I mean?
Leads into my next question. In the vein of planning, there are probably dozens and dozens of high school kids and parents that are listening to this podcast together, in the car on the ride home from a game or practice or whatever it is. And I'm sure a lot of them would love to be, future Wake Forest players. We also know that most parents and kids get to do this college recruiting thing once, right? There's no do-over unless you got another kid, and that doesn't necessarily help the older sibling, but they're very naive in many cases. They may be unprepared, just having not gone through it before. And I'm guessing that just in the time that we've talked, you've probably gotten 75 emails to the Wake Forest accounts on the recruiting side of things. So let's maybe talk about the recruiting process. What are the biggest mistakes coaches, players make? Like, do you have specific pet peeves that maybe don't make them look great, to Wake Forest? I know your circumstances are very different in that you are, kind of taking the cream of the crop in many cases, but, for the 15-year-old kid that would someday like to play at Wake Forest, what advice would you give to them?
Wow. All right, I'm going to give this advice not like you're just going to Wake Forest. I'm going to give this advice to anyone that would listen, okay? Because I didn't always recruit kids to Wake Forest. I recruited kids to a Division II school, so I have an understanding of it. My thing is this: the number one thing that gets made a mistake on both sides of recruiting is that we all make transactional decisions constantly. We take players because we want their talent as coaches. We get focused on the talent, and we don't think about their personalities, the fit, like, are we compatible, right? And it's the same thing for players, right? They get so enamored with wanting to go to the highest level, wanting to go to the coolest, the sexiest school with the best facilities, and we're not compatible enough in this process. So I think compatibility needs to be number one. I started doing this where I talk to everybody like, hey, if you were on a blind date with the prettiest girl you've ever seen in your life, and she asked you to marry her within the first 30 seconds, what would you say? And every single kid goes, no, there's no way I'd say yes. I said, then why do we do this in recruiting? Can you explain it to me? Because it's no different. They're like, well, I don't know the person. I don't know if we have the same interests. I'm like, yeah, it's the same thing when picking a school. It's the same thing, right? Yeah, we turn on the big leagues and we watch, and they're like, guys are from everywhere, right? So, like, if we're actually talking about growing as people, and we're actually talking about, like, having a great experience and becoming the best version of ourselves, then compatibility is important. Okay, so that's the first thing I would tell everybody is, like, do the work to figure out if your belief systems align with their belief systems. Like, spend time trying to figure out. And, like, I said this a lot, like, part of the problem is people don't ever tell you what they believe in. And when they don't tell you what they believe in, it's hard to know if you align with them, right? It's always a sales job. It's always like this game of telling people what they want to hear. I'm like way, 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 way out on telling anybody what they want to hear anymore. I could care less. Like, I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm just like, yeah, you either like it or you don't. Most of the time, people dislike me anyway, so it's fine. Like, it might as well just keep rolling. At least I could do things I believe in. You know what I mean? So that's number one. The next thing I would say is try to find a place that you in your heart feel that you can get on the field as early as possible. Prioritize. And look, I'm not saying like go somewhere like where it's guaranteed playing time. That's not what I'm saying. Like, people are smart. There's information out there. There's data. You can get honest feedback on what type of player you are, and you can do a very, in-depth evaluation of the program you're looking at. And you can say to yourself, looking in a mirror, yes, like I am 100% good enough to start there as a freshman without someone needing to tell you that or not, right? Like you can make a very, like, people don't want to do that because a lot of people are delusional. But like, if we're going to get objective and be real, like you could tell yourself for real if you are good enough to potentially be that guy as a freshman. And I think now more than ever, you should, right? And here's the thing, it's going to be harder than ever. So like, there's going to be very few guys that can do that as freshmen at our level. So if you're going to be a freshman to do that at our level, like you're probably going to have to be a mega dude. So the reality is, like, I think most kids should go to probably a lower level of college baseball and play and grow and develop. And I think that there's going to be some mid-major coaches that really figure out a unique niche. They're going to get the best kids in their area to stay home, and they're going to convince them that they should play right away. And they're going to tell them, hey, you should go on and transfer after that. And then conversely, they're going to take those kickbacks from the schools that were, kids went to, and they're going to take them and get them better. And you're going to start to see some mid-major schools find their own like little niche and be really good because of that. The new, we'll say sexy is not going to be like hashtag D1 bound, SEC, ACC, Power 4. Like that's not what it's going to be. The new sexy is going to be I hit 350 with 15 pumps my freshman year. Whether it was at, Franklin Pierce, Southern New Hampshire, or whether it was at Marist or, wherever, or Arkansas, it doesn't matter. Like the game is the game. Like you're going to need to play the game now. So I would say find compatibility, go somewhere where you can play the game and actually perform, because the greatest teacher and the greatest developer by like without a shadow of a doubt is the game. That's why Branch Rickey had 50 rounds in the draft. And that's why we had all these levels in the minor leagues, because the game taught you everything you needed to know. Now we've gotten a lot smarter. We've used science and we've used medicine and we use all these cool things to grow. But the game is still the greatest teacher, so you have to play. And then lastly, like now that there's going to be more scholarship money in the game, I think people should actually leverage it to lessen student loans. I know that's probably not a popular take, but like it's going to be way cooler in 10 years that if you played a lot and don't have to pay as much money than just saying you went to like some school because you went to some school. Use baseball to allow you to get an education that you normally wouldn't have gotten, and now use baseball to pay for said education. Like to me, like that's a no-brainer. Like we have so many people that we met in our lives that have all this student loan debt and maybe couldn't even get into a school that they wanted to go to. Our sport's changing in a cool way. You're going to have more opportunities to get into places that you normally wouldn't have gotten into, and you're going to have more resources to pay for these things. So utilize that. Those would be my big three pieces of advice I would tell kids. And then with that, like, in terms of how do you get recruited, spend all your time and money on development. Like, stop worrying about like going to be seen. It doesn't matter. Like, we got into this thing for a while. I've said this a couple of times when we've had camps and stuff at our place. But when we were young, right, there was no travel baseball. There was only Legion baseball in New England. And if you didn't make the Legion team, you didn't play, or you had to go play like in the local Babe Ruth League. So when you were 14 or you were 15, you had to play against the 18 and 19-year-olds. You had no choice. That was the only option. And that was the way it was. So your skills got better because you play with older players, right? Well, if you think about the way the dichotomy of travel baseball works nowadays, when you're 14, you only play with 14. When you're 15, you only play with 15. You only play against your age group. We need to start having kids play up in, like, whether it's practices or scrimmages, but play tougher competition, right? Play better players, fail more. They can't get recruited until they're juniors in high school. Play the game more, grow your skill set, develop. And the reason I say that is because, like, people are all the time like, well, we got to play the best competition. Listen, if you're 14, going to play 18 and 19-year-olds in your actual town is going to be better than playing the best 14-year-olds in Florida. Like, if you're from Manchester, New Hampshire, and you're 14, Go play all the 19-year-olds. They'll be just as good as the 14-year-olds in Florida. No, like that's how you save money and grow. That's how you save money. That's how you spend time on, building a workload, learning, like growing. Like they can't recruit. You can't get recruited until you're a junior anyway now. So the goal should be, how do I get as good as I can until that time?
And people don't realize those opportunities to face better talent are more prevalent than ever before, because you can do it in private facilities just as part of training. Like the number of times that we've had high school kids who have caught big league bullpens or stood in on, live BPs or whatever it is. There's so many of those opportunities. There were two. I mean, there was really, really good stuff on there on a number of fronts, but there were two things that really jumped out at me. The first one is I would encourage people to go and just browse some major league rosters and just look at the number of late round picks and non-drafted free agents from 2020 or the years prior to it, who went off the grid during COVID, trained their butt off, got on aggressive throwing programs, learned a new pitch, who fast forwarded it. It was an amazing reminder that there are some guys that are 8 to 12 months away from being completely different people. It's remarkable how many of those guys are impacting, not just upper level rosters, but big league rosters. I think that's a great lesson for guys where, hey, you got to go play, you've got to develop. You're maybe only a year away. But I thought that the last, or point number 3, I should say, about effectively trading baseball for a little bit of long-term financial security is fascinating to me, because that's really the first time I've ever heard that said. In the past, it was, hey, there's 11.7 scholarships. Pick a school that's, don't bank on getting more than a 25% ride. And it's a very different discussion as of really this year. If I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, all right, let's just call it for what it is. Like, if you're the best player in, Cornwall, New York, right? And you could go to SEC or ACC schools and maybe not get the same amount of money, but you could stay in your backyard. And in order to get you in your backyard, one of those smaller schools is probably going to have to dump a huge number into you to get you, but you're going to play right away. That makes sense, probably. Maybe do that for a year or two. And if you're on the same page with the coach, then maybe you're transferring to school X, and you're getting another big scholarship and maybe making some money. Like, if you play this thing right and you're forthright with your coaches and you understand the game. See, a lot of it comes down to being very honest with people and saying hey, what are we trying to do here? What's the game plan? And I think you're going to find people that don't want to do it one way, and that's fine. And they're going to want to do it another way. There's going to be all different variations of it in between. But if you can be super honest and know what you're looking for, you can leverage not paying for school now. It can be done. I've done this. This is going to be, I think, year 16. And I've never said that, but you can absolutely leverage probably not having to pay for college now, which I never thought would be the case. I was fortunate. I had a pretty large scholarship to go to school. I still paid student loans up until 4 years ago. I mean, and there's been, as of 3 weeks ago, the number of major leaguers all time was 20,655. That number's probably grown by 20 or 30 since then. I usually look once a month. So that's, since the 1850s, right? So 20,655 people have ever played one day in the major leagues. So let's just call it what it is. The majority of kids aren't playing in the major leagues. So you might as well get some financial security here. And you might as well get into a school that you normally wouldn't have gotten into, right? We get so caught up in the baseball component of it. But what would be wrong going to a really high academic school and getting a really good scholarship? Right? What's wrong with that?
Checks a few very important boxes for people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing. We should do that. That should be valuable. That should be considered important, But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Changing times, man. Well, you've been very generous with your time. We always wrap up with a quick lightning round. I'll give you some short questions, and you can throw whatever you want at me for answers. What's one book that every player should read?
I have so many.
It doesn't have to be one. If you got a couple off the top of your head, that's fine too.
Atomic Habits, James Clear, really good. Legacy by James Kerr, really good. I one of my all-time favorites, and I don't know if this is for everybody, but it's the one of the books that got me into this, like reading constantly, was Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. Um, yeah, I like to read a lot. So there's a lot. Like I could probably name like 5 or 6 more, but those are three that I think. Actually, it starts with Why, The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. I make every recruit that I recruit watch his TED Talk video on that. But yeah, that's a tough question to ask me. I could go on that one for
Well, those are
hours.
good answers because those could be good for players, parents, or coaches. Those check a lot, especially legacy. I mean, that you could give that to a group of accountants, and it's going to
Yeah.
change the way their practice works. If you could go back in time and give high school Corey some advice, what would it be?
Holy cow. I don't know where to start. I was not ready for college. I don't even, you stumped me. I don't even know where to start with that. I wish I just knew half of what I knew about baseball now, but I don't know. I knew nothing, you know? Man, what would I say? I would say try to be present from day one on campus. I got really caught up my freshman year, and I was one of those kids that like stayed in their room all the time. I thought I was going to be a big leaguer. I worried about outcomes constantly. Uh, I overtrained. I had no idea what I was doing. I was probably pretty anxious and didn't realize it. So I feel like I don't think I like really capitalized on that first year of college as well as I could have. I was angry often. I was often angry for no reason other than like I was insecure. So I would say be present. Be present from day one because it really is an awesome time in your life and you should enjoy it. Now, if you want to go like if you want to really break it down, it's probably a good thing that I was insecure. It's probably a good thing that all those things happened. So I can go back and look at it and like, retrain how I think. But I met my wife my sophomore year, towards the end of sophomore year. And it was like the first time I came out of like my dorm room, basically. It was like I was a bear coming out of a cave in the wintertime out of hibernation. And who knows? Maybe if I wasn't in a dorm room for that first year and a half, I would have never met her. You know what I mean?
Hindsight's always 2020, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this was tremendous, man. I know you were a very busy guy. We were going back and forth on kiddo drop off this morning with summer camps, and I know you got a million things going on campus on top of all of the recruiting floodgates that were opened yesterday. So, has been an awesome thing following your career, seeing the amazing things you're doing, and the people you've impacted along the way. I know we've had a lot of friends and players and industry colleagues in common, and people sing your praises left and right. So it was cool to finally have you on.
Thanks for having me. I mean, you were technically my first strength coach I ever worked with, so it's great to come full circle.